Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us. We get almost 100 people in. I'm sure people will be joining late, but we want to get started on time because we've got a lot of information available for you today. A lot of time sensitive information and updates for you. So yeah, JC, if I'm ready to rock and roll, how about you?
You are ready to rock and roll, sir. We've got everything covered. I'm keeping an eye on that waiting room and all of the Q&A that's coming into us.
Yeah, and it looks great. Thanks, everyone out there. Oh, we got Kiki and Barry and Brad and Ariel and Boyd. We got Anna. We got all you guys are great. Thanks for returning and thanks for telling your friends about us. We appreciate the referrals and we appreciate people asking us how to join us each month. So thanks again. And remember, they can always join right from our website. So let them know where we live, fflconsultants.com. Today, we're going to go over the following updates. We're going to go over some ATF and state laws I think you're going to find interesting on the ATF side. We're going to talk about burglaries and a concern we have regarding our friends in Washington and the Senate Select Committee who might be looking into security requirements for FFLs. We've always tried to stay away from that. ATF inspections, ATF revocations, the real cost of a revocation. JC is going to outline that for you so there's no misunderstanding in case you get caught in that snag. FFL to FFL transfers, still get a lot of questions on this. And we've got an update on the Minnesota Attorney General, State Attorney General's case against Fleet Farm. You guys all need to understand. On Compliance Corner, we're going to go over a whole bunch of things you need to know, things we're seeing, mistakes people are making, and questions we're getting, as well as talking a little bit about inventory. And then we're going to talk through our rapid fire questions and our Ask Us Anything event. That's always a big plus for the audience. All right, JC, let me talk through this one.
All right.
So, hey, a week ago, June 30th, down in Texas, most of you may have heard, but there's been a case on the docket that actually came around and was heard as Vanderstock v. Garland. And this is all regarding ATF ruling 2021 OF5. It was the frame and receiver ruling way back in early fall. And the good news is that our federal judge who heard the hearing vacated the entire ruling and basically just threw it out, claiming the ATF extended their reach to gun dealers. Basically, tried to amend the Gun Control Act without congressional approval in whole. This means that the brace, frame and brace ruling, which was all about ghost guns, 80% lowers, firearms parts, all being ruled, regulated by the ATF. That ruling basically was thrown out. Regardless of the contents of the ruling, it was all about the overreach or extended overreach by the ATF that was unconstitutional. We were hoping for this, and this is actually a major for the 2A community, as the ruling here and the justification for the vacating the ruling means the courts and the lawsuits all pending regarding arm braces and high capacity magazines and parts kits and building of firearms, all of that, all of those rules that the ATF has put in place over the last year or two may fall under the same scrutiny that the federal judge was able to actually impose on this regarding his decision to clearly vacate the ruling. So again, just sets precedence and the platform that the community was hoping for, which is combating the ATF's overreach and extension of the Gun Control Act rules and regulations upon FFLs. So we have to stay tuned for all of the other cases pending around the country. Will it be at the state or federal level? Will it be assault weapons or arm braces, etc., bump stocks, high capacity magazines? Those are the key items we're waiting on hearing more about. So stay tuned and we'll bring this information up to you as we find it occurring. So that was all good news for our community.
And just to touch on that, if the DOJ decides not to appeal as it relates to the 5th District's decision, it sets great precedent going forward. So let's keep our fingers crossed. You never know what the DOJ is going to do, but it does definitely set great precedent.
Next up, we've got our restricted states guide. We just had one edition for this month. It was over in Illinois as of July 1st. They implemented a private party transfer ruling whereby obviously any neighbors selling guns to neighbors, relatives, friends, online, at the gun shop, on a bulletin board, index card. Hey, they've got to now go into the gun deal at like 16, I now think 17 states that have this program in place. This is commonly known as hedging towards the, can't take that call. Hedging towards the universal background check program for private party transfers. So again, at the state level, we've got 17 states now doing this and requiring neighbors to come into a gun dealer. We see it as free marketing. It's walk-in traffic. If you guys do understand the program, great. If not, go out to our bonus button right there on our website and download the ATF's guide on private party transfers. We're also going to be reviewing some of the do's and don'ts and best practice for that later here in the presentation. When we do make these updates, we will update the version date or revised date on our guide that is always available out at our bonus button website on fflconsultants.com, and you can download the new version there. And if you're concerned with Illinois private party transfers. All right. Next up, we've got to talk about this. We haven't talked about this in a while. It's gun stores getting burglarized. The burglaries are on the rise. We are concerned, and so is Washington. So here's why. Burglaries at gun dealers are on pace with last year, and it was over 450. This year, we certainly expect to exceed that number with burglaries at gun dealers, and we urge you to take the right steps now before it becomes a requirement to do so. If you guys have any firearms friendly dealer friends in California or Illinois, you'll understand. And even now up in Washington state, they're all looking at requirements for gun dealers, which means capital investment, spending money, maybe reassessing your programs and equipment to see if you need to upgrade it or make it more compliant to what either the state, what those states are imposing there, or maybe the federal government imposes on you. And the reason we bring this up is we were contacted recently by the Senate Select Committee, who is focused on this in Washington on as part of what we believe is the whole gun control program with the bipartisan Safer Communities Act. We believe that this is becoming a hot topic again. We've been able to shoot this down in the past through the NSSF and other lawsuits and arguments. But we're worried that if we as a gun dealer community don't do the right thing and allow for guns to be stolen by bad guys in the middle of the night, that is just going to throw gasoline on that fire. So what must you do? You must improve your physical security requirements. We as an industry must decrease burglaries and guns being stolen from gun dealers. And now if they get in, that's one thing, but if they get your firearms and the firearms are fall into the hands of criminals, that's certainly another. The increase in burglary frequency will absolutely lead to stricter FFL requirements, lawyers, lawsuits, etc. So do your part, be proactive. Think about those capital improvements maybe you've been putting off for later. Maybe now's the time to improve your glass, your roll down gates, your showcases. Maybe it's time to figure out how to remove your guns from showcases at night. All of those ideas and challenges are in a document we call a security self-assessment. It's part of the Operations Secure Store program that JC and I were instrumental in developing back, I think in 16 and 17. We did launch it in 2018 as a joint effort with the ATF. It's a very simple program. We ask you to take advantage of it, download it if you can. It's free, it's just a PDF. It's broken down into 10 sections. It's available right now from our website. Again, just go hit that bonus button, and you can also download it at operationssecurestore.org, the NSSF website promoting the program. It's free. If you've got questions, once you go through your self-assessment, hey, reach out to us, send us an email, set up some time. we'll be happy to discuss options for you to prevent burglaries. And that's our goal as an industry, less guns for the criminals.
Yeah, let me just hop in there on that real quick. I think the real point here is one thing. If you want to take matters in your own hands and protect your business and help reduce the number of burglaries, that is so much more, so much better than having either a state or a federal government coming down and requiring you to do certain things, because we've been arguing this for years now. There is no one size fits all solution. So if you don't want the government coming down telling you what you have to do, take matters in your own hands and protect your inventory, protect yourselves from theft and loss. All right. I think that's key here. It's one or the other. Either we take matters in our own hands and get things done and protect our inventory, or the government's going to tell us how to do that. And we don't want that. That's been our argument the entire time. So we don't want legislator to come down with nonsense that some staff member Googled. So.
Exactly. All right, let's get through the inspection updates just so you guys know what's going on around the country. In June, there was 824 inspections completed by the ATF. That's the second highest number that we've seen ever in 1 month. So back in, I think it was March, we had 908. Last month, we had 16 warning conferences where an FFL had to create an action plan, go and sit in a conference with the DIO in his or her area, with the ATF inspector involved, the area supervisor, and present their case for doing things correctly in all ways, record keeping going forward, and in FFL compliance. There were 18 inspections closed, resulting in revocations, meaning they went through that 8 or 10 month process. And at the end of the day, 18 FFLs actually had to surrender the license as a result of not winning the hearing and or not fighting to begin with and simply surrendering. And, that's just a sad day for a gun dealer. Overall, it's 2.818% of inspections resulting in revocations, final revocations. Annually, it's about a 2% number, meaning 2 out of every 100 inspections by the ATF will result in a gun dealer having to surrender the license and not being able to fight that fight. ATF inspection update. Here's the big offices. The big players are up there because of the amount of FFLs they supervise. Dallas, way up there at 106 inspections completed. Kansas City, 105. Remember, Kansas City is a multi-state office. Columbus, Ohio, kind of similar. They stretch into Iowa. Houston had 57, and the Boston and Chicago offices both completed 48. Again, 824 overall. Here's the interesting information, and this was a surprise to us when we actually looked at it. But here's a New Orleans office. They actually finally revoked 3 licenses last month, and they're never big on our list with a high number of audits or inspections. So, you don't have to worry. You don't have to just worry in areas where there's a lot of inspections occurring. It could be in a quiet area where there's only a few, but those few are very targeted, and they're coming up with enough violations to revoke a license. San Francisco, another one. We never talk about California. They revoked 3 FFLs last month. Again, final determinations. Up in Boston, there was 2, and then one in each of those other offices identified there. Again, 18 total in all. Gun dealers no longer in business. And let's look at this inspection update. Overall, there was a 14% increase over last year. Right now, we're expecting that through the end of the year, 14 to 15% increase. So this is not going to slow down. It's still ramping up. You should be concerned, as we are concerned, that you pass your next inspection and doing everything you possibly can to make sure your team is compliant. And then revocations for the year, we're proposing a number of about 180 based on numbers we're seeing average per month. That would be 100% increase over last year, because last year, which was a record-breaking year for ATF, they revoked 92 licenses. This year, they are already at 122 and growing. But hey, with all the bad news comes some good news. We actually had some great inspection results. And we're very happy about the folks we visited. JC and I are out every week visiting gun dealers or attending hearings. And we had Terry up in Illinois, Lara in Arizona, Tim in Texas, and Corey in North Carolina, all scored perfect on our mock audit inspection that we conducted. And regarding ATF inspections, we had Gary, Norman, Lindy, and Robert all come through unscathed, perfect records. Now, remember, when the ATF does not find any violations at your location following an inspection, they simply leave. They don't say good job, good boy, but we're happy to do so. They don't follow up with any documentation, so don't worry about that. If you don't have a sit down at the end of your ATF inspection and you don't have a closing conference to review all errors and violations, that's a good day. But again, if you ever have the ATF visiting or calling, please reach out to us, make us a partner. We had one call at 6:30 this morning over in Indiana. They have an inspection started and we helped get that FFL off on the right foot. He's feeling pretty good about his inspection. He's been following our guidance and these webinars for the last year religiously. So good luck to you, but be sure to call us if you have anything pop up with the ATF.
All right. So we're going to talk about the real cost of an ATF notice of revocation, so everybody is aware of what we're looking at here. All right. As JB mentioned, we're up 100% from last year. We're looking at an incredible increase year over year. And really the concerning part is every time I say, wow, we haven't gotten any phone calls about any revocations, it must be coming close to the end of the fiscal year and ATF is running out of money. And then I get 10 phone calls about somebody, different FFLs that have received a notice of revocation or appear to be receiving or getting ready to receive a notice of revocation. So we try to do everything we can to keep you all from getting into that box, that notice of revocation box, because it's a challenge. It's some work to get you out of trouble with the ATF. So be really aware of that. Don't underestimate the fees and work product that are required if your FFL is subject to a notice of revocation. I can tell you right now, at a bare minimum, for us to take a look at it and see what's going on, you're looking at a few hours worth of work. On average, just that initial review and a reply back to the ATF is about $510, depending on what all is involved. It depends really on what that notice of revocation looks like, what they're going after you on, etc. So then there's the due diligence and the detail review and building out your corrective action plan. And that can run you $3,500 to $4,000 at a minimum. So, and then you got your consultant travel expenses, depending on when that notice of revocation was received. Those travel expenses, actual travel expenses, can run upwards of a couple $1,000s. And then the one-day hearing prep, that's your coaching, all your testimony, building out your testimony. I actually build out your direct examination and cross-examination for the IOI. And that's going to be a couple $1,000s as well to spend that day with you prepping and ensuring we're aligned and everything is 100%. And then you have the day of revocation hearing, and that's another $2,000. So all in at a bare minimum, if you have the most minor of issues relative to, that post-hearing support and whatever that notice of revocation is, you're looking at anywhere from a minimum of $10,000. That's just to defend you for us. That's our actual work product and time and effort put into it. So you have a minimum expected cost of $10,000, right around there, right? Now, if it's an extreme notice of revocation, meaning there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of concerns, and you need an attorney, and that's our recommendation that you get an attorney, then you're going to look at double or triple those costs. So we always tell FFLs, look, here's what you're looking at. You're looking at $10,000 to $20,000 for us to support you. And believe it or not, $40,000 to $60,000 for an attorney to help you. So, there's this premium retail membership package out there that we talk about all the time from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And that package for $750 a year versus the $10,000 to $25,000 that it's going to cost you in the event you get a notice of revocation. I mean, you're looking at, we can't call it insurance, but there's a little bit of what do we say, JB? Kind of ease of mind, peace of mind package
What-
for $750. So
It's a one way you can sleep at night, right?
exactly. And that's, let me tell you something, people that go at every FFL that we've supported through a revocation, that is our goal, is to get them to be able to sleep at night. Because I can tell you, every one of them has told me, I have not been able to get a decent night's sleep since I received that notice of revocation. Now, we've had a number of wins over the last couple of weeks, but that's not to say every notice of revocation is a win. We've had losses too. So it's vitally, vitally important that you reach out to us well before you get that notice of revocation. When you get that report of violations, or you get that insight from the industry operations investigator who's doing your inspection that things aren't looking good, that's when you pick up the phone and call us. We've had too many FFLs calling us a week or 2 weeks before their actual revocation hearing saying, I need help. and last minute like that is very, very challenging for us.
Yeah, and the big reason, the big reason JC and I, we're not trying to sell the program or gain more clients. We're just having a real hard time when dealers call us at the last minute and ask us how much it costs because they had a bad inspection or they had a bad closing conference and didn't know about us, or didn't think it was going to happen to them. So we're just trying to continue to put this out there, and hey, we get in some kind of very tight conversations with people because of the expense. And unfortunately, we have to turn some people down and wish them good luck. It's not an overnight, willy-nilly, $1,500 process to get through. And we're just trying to make sure you guys are fully understanding of that before you get there, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you never get there.
Yeah, hopefully you never get there, and you get our pre-inspection document that kind of walks you through what you need to be prepared for. Look, I don't like doing revocation hearings. It's a lot of work, and I'd much rather have you be ready for your inspection and be good to go and not have to call us and not need our support in that way. I'd much rather do mock inspections and show you where you need to tighten things up and get things fixed before an ATF inspection. It's a much more pleasant experience for everybody, because those notices of revocation come at you and it's stressful. And I can let you talk to about 100 different FFLs and they'll tell you how stressful the process is. So, all right, we've had some revocation hearing home runs. I'd mentioned this earlier. We've had about 6 in the past week, 2 weeks now. So congratulations to Jason in Arizona, the 2 Kyles, Kyle in Iowa, Kyle in Florida, Junior down in Florida, James in Florida, Greg in Minnesota, and Marcy in Indiana. We've had a number of wins over the last couple months. For some reason, the last couple of weeks, we've had a half dozen come through, and we're in the middle of actually a couple of settlement agreements, which is, not exactly the best scenario, but you know what? Those FFLs that are going through those settlement agreements right now that we're negotiating, at least they're getting to keep their license, which is a good thing. The best alternative is you get to keep your license without having to do a settlement agreement. But you know what, if I can help an FFL keep their license and, a settlement agreement's what's necessary, then so be it. So congratulations to all those FFLs out there who have won their revocation hearings and are getting to stay in business. Now we just have to get them through their recall inspection. We've had a great success rate on recall inspections after a notice of revocation or revocation hearing. So that is awesome. Congratulations to you all. The best strategy to avoid a notice of revocation. Here you go. Get it right the first time. GIRFT, you have got to be 100% inspection ready each and every day. And that means you need to be paying attention to every firearms transaction. And don't be, the first and second check before that firearm goes out the door is critical to your success. I can't re-emphasize that enough. Critical to your success. Checking it a third time before it gets filed, after the firearm's been transferred, that's all well and good, but you really have to drive it home and say that second check is critical. And the way we teach our FFLs is this. You need to teach that person that does that second check that it's not about, knowing that your buddy or your coworker knows how to do a firearms transaction. What it's all about is real simple. Your second check, that person, you are protecting that first person who actually transferred the firearm from being fired. Period. The end. First words out of my mouth. Who's the employee and have you fired them? Anytime somebody calls me about a notice of revocation, the employee involved been terminated from the employment as it relates to this transaction. That's the first question I ask each and every time. So get it right the first time. It's imperative. You got to make it happen.
All right, we're going to jump in a little bit here on FFL to FFL transfers. JC and I, we analyze our, we take over 300 calls a month between the two of us, just on your questions and your phone calls and your texts, et cetera. So we decided there's just way too many questions on this run amok, very uncontrolled activity we call FFL to FFL transfers. So, hey, test yourself here. We're going to ask you some questions. And if you know how to answer all of these, great. If not, make sure you put your questions in that chat so we can get to some of these at the end of the session. But hey, when the name on the receipt is not the same as the person picking up the firearm transfer, do you know what to do? Under 21 purchases, people lying on the website and they click that they're over 21 and they're trying to buy a handgun and they click the right buttons on the website and make payment and the gun shows up and they're 19 years old and they show up with big brother or mom or dad. Do you know what to do? Individuals selling on gun brokers shipping handguns via USPS. It arrives at your front door, and they're a private entity. They're not an FFL dealer sending you a gun in the US Postal Service system. Are you okay with that? Do you know what to do? I'll give you the answer to that one. It's actually okay to receive. It's just that we get this question all the time by dealers receiving them by USPS. It goes to the post office, then they catch it. Can they receive it? The answer is yes. We can talk more about that later if you need more on that topic. Shockwaves, are they being sold as shotguns and long guns online or being represented as shotguns online and showing up at your doorstep for a customer who's under 21 years old? AR pistols arriving with arm braces in the box. How do you handle that? Are you clear? Do you know what to do? Those pistol grip shotguns being shipped with the shoulder stock in the box, same thing, those combo kits. How do you receive it? Is it a long gun? Is it a other? Can it be transferred? And then how about those firearms that are never picked up? They're sitting on the back shelf. Do you know how to properly handle those? Or are you just taking those and putting them in a showcase and selling them at the end of the 6 months when somebody doesn't pick them up? All of these issues are issues surrounding FFL to FFL transfers. If you're good with all of this and have the knowledge to get through these pitfalls and bumps in the road on the transfer program, let us, that's great. If not, ask us some questions at the end of the session. And always with all of this information, make sure you're using our manufacturer and importer guide that again is available at our website. Just by clicking that big bonus button at the bottom, you can get access to all of our quick guides right there. And along with the state's quick reference guide, all of these come into play when you're dealing with the FFL to FFL transfers. All right. Again, we're just trying to cut down on a lot of those calls that we're getting from our viewers. All right. All right, the federal court up in Minnesota, JC, you want me to take this one?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So this is pretty important, guys, and we're going to be watching this. We want to watch this. The state attorney general in Minnesota, a guy named Ellison, he filed a lawsuit in October on behalf of the state, alleging that Fleet Farm, which is a big multi-unit, I believe, high 30 number farm and home type of big box retailer, they sell guns. Well, lo and behold, they sell 37 firearms to 2 individuals out of a couple of their stores over 16 months. The sad part is, very sad part, is that although everything was handled, the transfers are handled legally, the background checks were completed legally and lawfully, everything was documented as needed and required, the state is alleging that those 2 folks bought firearms for other people making straw purchases. And it all came to light when one of those firearms was used in a mass shooting, and it was traced back to one of these individuals, and 6 other firearms thereafter were traced back to other crimes where the firearms transferred to these 2 individuals by Fleet Farm were basically alleged to be straw purchasing, active straw purchasing. So the question before us and before the courts is, is this going to be protected by the PLCAA, which is the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which has been in place since 2006, which says, if you do everything right as a gun dealer, you can't be held liable for the activities and actions of folks who transfer those guns from you. If you were doing everything right, you weren't supposed to be held accountable, similar to buying a car, as the car manufacturer accountable for what you do with that car if you have an accident, et cetera, after you buy it. So this, the state basically argued or filed suit against Fleet Farm. They appealed, the case was heard, and the judge in the case actually said, no, the PLCAA cannot be applied. The retailer should have had systems in place or knowledge of these activities of these two individuals across their many retail locations. So this question comes up very often, especially in our after following our sessions in our FAQ, is how am I to keep track of people going from one store to another? Am I required to do so? Well, that's the big question here. We're going to have to watch this and see how this winds down. We're going to have to see what the final ruling is. It will be appealed as it proceeds. We're sure Fleet Farm is going to have to spend the money on attorneys and argue their responsibility in this case. Certainly, they don't want to open themselves to civil liability. They don't want to answer to the claims put forth by anyone injured or unfortunately killed in these shootings. So this is going to be one to watch. It just goes back to the question of how and why and if someone with multi-licenses across many locations, and as many of you out there, are going to be held accountable for implementing a program to monitor guns transferred to any one or more than one individual over any period of time for the purpose of resale or store purchasing. Again, question 26B on the 4473 really talks to this question. Are you purchasing this firearm for somebody who should not have it? If those folks were answering no to those questions, they would obviously be violating a law and committing a felony. So there's a whole lot of different pieces to this. But if you're a multi-unit retailer out there, you have 4 or 5 stores, you have to be as concerned as someone with 100 or 200 stores. So we're going to keep you updated, but this broke on June 27th, where the PLCAA was deemed not reliant to defend this retailer in what they did. So we'll keep you updated on this as it proceeds through the court system. Compliance Corner. All right, this is where we get nitty-gritty on everything you should and could be doing better to prevent any type of violations during a future ATF or mock audit inspection. And when folks call us, again, those 300 calls are very informative, very productive. We feel great about providing answers to all of you. But the first question we get is from many new callers is, why such a fuss? And the answer is pretty simple, because everything you do as a gun dealer, everything you do from acquiring to record keeping, to background checking, to talking and qualifying your customers, to disposing those firearms is all about the trace. The ATF may not be in your location for many months or many years or even a decade. We have one Pacific Northwest FFL up there. He hasn't seen the ATF in 11 years. And of course, we're not going to go ahead and tell you who he is, because he wants to stay off the radar, under the radar. So the longer they're not in your place of business, the better you are for this non-compliance issue or the zero tolerance program. But everything you do is all about the trace. Your paperwork, your details, your record keeping will be scrutinized through the trace process, even if the ATF never steps foot into your door. So they may never show up, but they are going to call. And if you're getting an urgent trace, that means someone has someone in custody and they need to know what is happening or what has happened with that firearm and who was it transferred to, when, what was it, can you identify it, and what are the details? So here's the nitty-gritty behind why you have to be perfect in your record keeping. There's over 500,000 gun traces annually, and the prosecutor, the person or criminal sector where that firearm is involved, is looking for the information as to who is lawfully supposed to handle that, have that firearm in their possession, and maybe who is not supposed to have that firearm in their possession. It's critical that your prosecutors out there have confidence in the system and the ATF. That's why the ATF is running around, not only to making sure you are documenting selling firearms legally and lawfully, but that you have impeccable record keeping to support that prosecution if and when it might ever occur. It might be a week, a month, a year, or even 10 years from now, but that is the critical point behind the detail and why everything we talk about is so critically important and why you must be perfect. So again, back to what JC said, you know, you must have multiple people many times getting it right the first time. And if you do have people doing a second or third review and inspection of the documents and your process, make sure you are correcting behaviors before it's disclosed to the ATF, whether it be through an inspection or through a trace. All right. So, hey, more tips, ATF Form 4473 tips. The new form we mentioned last month has been approved and reviewed, and we're just waiting for some type of announcement. Whether or not that comes this month or next month, you know, we don't know, but we will let you know as soon as we hear that there is a new form in play, and we just don't have a launch date, whether it be late fall or January 1st, just be known that it's coming, and it should be simpler for both you and the customer to complete and understand. A lot of the feedback we've gotten from you since the launch of this last revision last December has been addressed, and we feel confident that it'll be easier to execute again for the customer and for you. But we want to talk about dates. If there's one area of concern that we have and that JC sees in all of the hearings he attends and all of the inspections and reports of violations we review for clients, dates is a great area for improvement. This is the one area that impacts a lot of your background check process, the validity of your background check, the criteria, the transfer dates, the delays, the denial dates, the Brady date expiration dates, all critically important. So pay attention to all of the dates. Maybe this month, make July between now and our next session, make it, focus on dates. It's the dates of birth, the certification dates, ID expiration dates, your PCS effective dates and expiration dates if you have military, active military in your area, your next submittal dates, your delayed dates, your Brady expiration dates, pre-certification and date transferred. Dates. Focus on dates in your review process and at the point of transfer, and we guarantee you'll have less errors on your next inspection. More tips for you. Items 21A through K on the section B for your customers. All must be a no except 21A. They all have to be answered no. If somebody answers a yes on any of those questions, B through K, it's a no-go. It's stop. Stop the transfer process. Do not pass go. Do not do a background check. You can ask your customer to review the form and make sure the answers are complete and accurate, but please don't point out any specific item of concern that may be prohibiting that transfer, as that may be deemed coaching and counseling. And on question 21A, again, that should be a yes or left blank. If someone's picking up a firearm that's been repaired and it's for someone else, they can leave that blank. But all other questions must be a no. If someone answers 21B with a yes, which we are finding very frequently, it's because that person is moving too fast. They don't understand the question. And certainly the FFL employee didn't catch it when they reviewed the application for transfer. 21B must be a no to proceed with a transfer. Items 21N1 and N2, we're talking about this every month. No is okay. No or blank on 21N1 and 21N2 for aliens and non-immigrant visa applicants. It's okay to leave it at no. You don't have to call the customer back to correct it. You don't have to scribble it all out and make corrections. It can be left as a no if they accidentally filled it in as such. And items 21C and D, you're on your delays. That under 21, let's talk about under 21 delays, which came out last fall as the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It said under 21 delays, everyone interpreted that to be a mandatory 3-day delay, and then we kind of understood it to be a mandatory 10-day delay. Well, long story short, under 21 will automatically go to a delay status and will continue to proceed to denial as soon as it is reviewed and updated. So even though it says, everyone was under the interpretation it was going to be a mandatory 3-day or 10-day delay, let's just call it an automatic 3-day until proceeded or denied. And yes, you can transfer after the 3-day delay if your status on that under 21 transfer E has not been updated to a 10-day delay. And how do you know that? Well, they were calling you and letting you know that in the past, but up until a few months ago, up until a few months ago, they were calling you. Now they simply update it in your NICS status screen. So please be sure whenever you transfer a firearm that is in delay status, you are checking your e-NICS system and looking at the current status for that person. And if they're still open or researching, go ahead and the Brady date expiration is passed. Go ahead and print out that status report. Go ahead and transfer that firearm if you so desire. Remember, you're not required to do so. And if you do file that status report with your in your system, in your program, go ahead and file it in your buddy file. Do not file it with the 4473. The ATF is looking at all miscellaneous documents that are not required to be attached to the 4473 to find errors and discrepancies when they do come to do your inspection. So keep those in your buddy file, but print them out, keep them, have proof that you did not transfer a delay when it was actually a denial. Okay, keep your proof. Many delays and proceeds recently, this is concerning, have been changed to denials 1 or 2 weeks after the fact. So what we've been hearing, especially in the last 3 weeks or so, is you guys, FFLs and others, calling us and saying, I had to proceed, and 2 weeks ago I transferred the firearm, and they're calling me today and telling me it's a denial. Am I in trouble? Okay, again, if you printed out your NICS status report and you can show that it was a proceed from 2 weeks ago, and you have that documentation, you should be fine. But if they call today and say it's a denial, and now your NICS system is showing it's been changed, updated to a denial because of whatever reason, which can happen, you got to prove that you did the right thing at the right time. And the only way to prove that is if you have that NICS status printout that you did the right thing at the right time. So don't think this is unusual, and know you're not in trouble, and we don't know why this is happening. We assume there could be a variety of factors. It could be new employees in NICS. It could be maybe a researcher making some mistakes and a supervisor correcting a decision in NICS. But go ahead and be very, very careful. Update your program, print your records, and make sure you're filing them correctly. And lastly, on the 4473, please be sure you are listing manufacturer and/or importer if your firearm is imported. Don't take the shortcuts. Don't call us. Don't send us pictures. If it's printed on the firearm, it says imported by, or if there's a company in another country that's clearly marked, and there's an importer that's listed with the U.S. city and state, clearly your gun has been imported, and clearly you are required to list the importer and/or manufacturer and/or importer, if any, in your A&D records. And then why not just let those flow over to your 4473? Why not take the extra few seconds it takes to list the importer and manufacturer over on your 4473 in box 1 if you have both? Why not take a little time and be consistently perfect in your record keeping? We know that the 4473 box 1 says, list the manufacturer and/or importer if different. But you know what? A lot of people are getting this wrong. And the person doing that exercise is also taking a shortcut over on the bound book side and not listing it properly over in the bound book or A&D records. So please get the program in place. We have a great guide out on our website that's available to you. Have your employees review and sign off on it, and just do it right the first time and be complete in your record keeping. All right. Talk a little bit about out-of-state residents. We keep coming after this, but again, these are the majority of questions we continue to get from FFLs like you. If they're out-of-state residents, make sure that you understand not only your state laws, but the state laws where that person resides in the other state. If you don't know the laws, go ahead and look them up on our restricted states guys. Make sure you use caution when transferring long guns to out-of-state residents. It might be an AR restriction. There might be a registration requirement. There might be a waiting period, a mandatory holder waiting period in that other state where they're from, specifically on AR type long guns. Remember, please, that no handguns, receivers, PGFs, shockwaves, other category firearms are permitted to be transferred to out-of-state residents. Although you are, if you're a pawnbroker, you are able and legally compliant if you redeem a handgun to an out-of-state resident. If it was a pawn redemption, only when it's a pawn redemption can an out-of-state resident transfer a handgun, and that would be specific to pawnbrokers. Remember, no out-of-state carry permits, LTCs, CCWs, CHLs, whatever your state calls them. No out-of-state concealed carry permits are permitted for use as exemptions if your state allows for that, unless it's been distributed or provided by your state, your county or state offices. Out-of-state carry permits, no go, not permitted. You can use them as identification if they have all the elements for a photo ID or a supplementary address, for example, but you cannot use them as the exemption for a background check if they're from out of state. And of course, they have to be unexpired. So make sure those CCWs are unexpired if you are using them in state for an exemption. And again, our tools are available to you. The restricted states guide is out there on our website, as are some other documents you may be interested in using for training for your staff. Let's talk about private party transfers and then active military transfers. Okay, real easy. We talked a little about this earlier. Private party transfers. So when a neighbor comes in, wants to sell his gun to his neighbor, the other neighbor, here's the best practices, the do's and don'ts. Okay, aside from having to fill out the 4473 and do a background check, do not acquire the firearm from the seller until you receive a proceed for the buyer. And I'll explain why that's like the number one thing to remember. They don't explain that clearly in the ATF pamphlet on how to process private party transfers. So we want to make sure do not take that firearm from the seller until the buyer receives a proceed or approval. Okay. And here's why. If the buyer's delayed, with their background check, the seller should take the firearm home with them. Do not, like I said, do not hold it, do not take it, because if you acquire it and that buyer is denied, that seller, you have to return that firearm to the seller of the firearm. And the only way to do so, very similar to a consignment transaction, is to do a 4473 and a background check if you've kept that gun overnight and if you acquired it into your bound book. Okay, you can't just simply hand the customer back his firearm if the buyer gets denied on a background check. So another best practice would be very right up front before you even start one of these is ask both of them, do you both have ID and can you both pass a background check, knowing that this could be the pothole you don't want to step into. Okay. Talk a little bit about military transfers. Again, we talked about them earlier, but military transfers primarily, actually exclusively, can only be completed on military personnel who are based in your state. Okay, period. If you have someone come in and say they're a member of the military, active military, they must be based in your state to move forward. Otherwise, you have to handle that customer just like any other customer, whether it be an out-of-state driver's licenses, etc. They do not reside in the state if they're not based in your state. Okay, so they must be on active duty status and based in your state. They must present the valid military ID, the DoD or a CAC card. Okay, they must present their official PCS military orders, permanent change of station orders that are unexpired, and list the base in your state that you're familiar with. They do not need proof of residency. They don't need anything else for 26B. Any address they list on line 10, as long as they're based in your state, is acceptable. Your PCS information and documentation must be accurate as you list it. Okay. You actually the rule is do not use the military member's driver's license. Again, if they're based in your state, do not touch the driver's license. That's only required if they're based in another state and trying to buy a gun in your store. Okay. If they reside in your state and are based in your state, if they have a driver's license from your state, and they're based in your state, you don't need to do anything with the PCS orders. They can just handle their transfer as long as they're a resident of the state and have proof of such. They can just go ahead and use the driver's license like any other normal customer and get a background check. But if they say they're from out of state, it's military ID and PCS orders. And if you're still unfamiliar with any of these items, please give us a call and let us help out. Okay. Quickly, this question comes up very, very often, and we get all types of crazy questions on this throughout the month. What documents can I use for 26B, which is the acceptable documentation for current residency and or full legal name? Well, here's the list, okay? And we're going to, as a result of your questions and your requests, we're going to put this into a training doc, and we're going to put this out on our portal and send you a link to that as well when this recording gets sent out to you later this week. And we're very happy to say there's a whole lot of things that you can use for supplementary address as long as it's government issued from a state or federal or town or government agency. And typically the top two here we see all the time is a hunting or fishing license. I actually had somebody calling with a trapping license last month. That was cool. Never saw a trapping license. It was up in the Northwest, obviously, towards Alaska. And then secondly, current car registrations. People seem to register their cars when they move into the state. And so that's perfectly well if their address is currently listed on that. And that's good. You can also list, I think we had it on here. Yeah, concealed carry permit. We get this a lot. You know, the address may not be the same as the driver's license, but their full legal name, you know, versus a middle initial type of thing comes into play. So between the two, between the driver's license and concealed carry permit, you can use that combination of information, you know, to get through the section C area on your 4473. But again, we'll put this out there. Things we don't want you to use and that are not authorized to be used rather are, you know, things like a driver's license issued by Mexico. We get a lot of those. We get 4 or 5 of those a month. No, it has to be issued by a U.S. government agency and or a passport. An international passport can be accompanied by some other government issued documentation on that prior list. So again, we'll put this information out there, what's acceptable, what's not. In California, please pay attention that the residential lease is permitted in California on the DOJ paperwork to prove residency, but that's not 4473 approved. That's on the DROS document you guys all fill out, DROS. But a residence lease is not okay for 26B on the 4473. And lastly, remember, you're not required to go ahead and make copies of all these documents, but you are required to list the issuing agency and the state, respective state it was issued in, on line 26B for the document you're accepting. So go ahead and make sure you're being detailed to that degree, but you're not required to keep copies. If you like to keep copies, go ahead and keep them in your buddy file. Okay. And lastly, we're going to talk about when was your last inventory? All right, we get the question a lot. JC deals with it when he's trying to help folks in the hearing process or revocation process. Yeah, we recommend inventories at least quarterly, if not more frequently. You can do gun counts, you know, weekly, daily, monthly, paying critical attention to all of the details. Even if you have an automated program, if you're scanning gun tags, we find errors all the time, and so does the ATF. Find errors with transposed serial numbers, and that all happens at the point of acquisition. So make sure your folks who are acquiring firearms, putting them into your bound book, whether it be computerized or paper, are not looking at paperwork, that they're looking at the firearm. They're acquiring it based on the markings on the firearm, not the invoices, the sales receipts, the pawn tickets, the shipping invoices, none of that. Please pay attention to the firearm itself, inspect the firearm, and obtain all your markings from the firearm to put into your bound book. And lastly, we want you to get it right the first time, as JC said. Review every 4473 2 and 3 times before the transfer. Okay, before the transfer. It's always easy to correct errors before the transfer. Give us a call if you have to. We do answer the phone 24/7, including weekends for you gun show guys. ENICS and state background checks, you know, again, printed documentation, have proof that you transferred with the right decision in place, whether it be open, researching, delay versus a denial that might happen later, might get changed to later. And keep those in your buddy files. If you had previous inspections, remember you cannot have any repeats. If you had previous adverse action, you can't have any violations on your next inspection. Conduct your inventories, complete your A&D daily, prevent straw purchases. This case in Minnesota is going to be very interesting to watch. Submit your multiple firearms forms daily, keep proof of submittal, and respond to your traces quickly, same day, next day, and always within 24 hours. All right. JC, where you traveling to?
Oh my goodness. So we're going to be down in Charlotte, North Carolina on 7/19, and then over to Charleston, West Virginia on 7/21. We're going to be with the ATF and the FBI NICS section doing retailer training days. So if any of you are in that area or close by, please feel free to go ahead and register. Here's the information for registering. Each venue is limited to the first 100 attendees, but FBI NICS, who is managing all of the attendance and registrations, is keeping record of others who may register late, and if any openings come up, they're reaching out and making sure that everybody that can attend will attend. So go ahead and send that email to NICS and get that information to them so you can get registered.
And if any of you are heading out to the National Pawn Association Expo next week in Atlanta, I'll be there. Please come by the booth. I'll be at the NSSF booth talking to our clients and signing up new members. And on Tuesday at 2:45 p.m., don't miss our session on straight shooting firearm experts tell all. We got a great panel that's going to be talking about a lot of what we just went over and other additional worthwhile best practices for pawnbrokers selling and redeeming, pawning firearms. So, hey, just a reminder, again, here's the bonus button on the bottom of our website, right at the bottom of the landing page. Right there, you can get a whole access to everything we have available for you. Great documents, tools, and resources. Go click that button, get special access to our share drive, and call us if you have a great idea for another type of document we should be putting out there. And if you're not already an NSSF member, again, this is the trade association for your industry. They own and run SHOT Show. They fight for your rights as gun dealers. They've got different types of memberships available. Please support them in the fight to keep Washington from changing the way we do business. And if you're interested about that mock audit inspection or premium retail program, please call or email us before the price goes up. And JC, we are ready.
We are, baby. Let's do the rapid fire.
We are ready for rapid
Bring
fire.
it.
So,
Bring
yeah,
it.
you guys, we've got a whole bunch of questions in there. So go ahead and type your fingers off, put those questions in, we'll get to them in order. JC, are you ready?
I'm ready, man.
Okay.
Let's do this.
All right. When you take a gun in on consignment and resale, what information needs to be added to the A&D book? Do I need the DL number for the person who owns the guns, or just the address and person's name?
Name and address only, just like any other firearm if you're receiving it from an individual or from a business, but name and address only. If you want to take a copy of the driver's license, go for it. You certainly can, but don't put that anywhere but the buddy file.
There you go. Scott asks, what's a mock inspection run? I guess he's asking about cost.
A mock inspection, it really just depends on whether or not you're an NSSF member, but out of pocket, say you're not an NSSF member, you're looking at probably right around $3,500 for a one-day visit. That's all in, that's expenses and everything. Again, that's an estimate. It could be a little bit less than that, but generally speaking, about all in about $3,500.
But if you join the NSSF premium retail program and you
then you get a special offer, $750 for that annual membership. You get a free mock inspection, completely free, all expenses paid, and you get that legal defense fund peace of mind. So and then if you're just a normal NSSF member, reach out to us. There may be a deal for you. Sometimes the NSSF will subsidize those visits. It's all kind of dependent on how long you've been a member, etc. So,
and if you're a regular member paid you $100 membership annual fee, you can prorate that against the $750 and get a little discount on the $750.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, just give us a call. Don't go out and to the website and fill it out yourself, because they'll assign a different consultant to you, and it won't be JCRI being assigned to come and visit you and do your inspection and be your consultant. Okay. We do that with you. So when can a new FFL expect to get their first inspection? Great question. We get a lot of these.
3 to 5 years is generally, the rule of thumb. Now, obviously, it depends. There's a number of factors. How many trace requests have you had? How many denied transactions? What's your volume of transactions? So when you go ahead and renew, if you've had a lot of denieds, a lot of traces, especially trace requests within 3 years of the transfer of the firearm, and you reported a high volume of transfers over the course of the last 3 years, then you can almost expect an inspection. They're getting pretty stringent about that 3 to 5 years. I know there's been a lot of FFLs that reached out to us and said it's been 14 years or 9 years. There's certain aspects of your business activities that kind of push you up to the top to be inspected.
Right. Yeah.
So expect 3 to 5 years though.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to say thanks to all of you, 150 of you, Mike and Maury and Nathan, everybody. We just can't say thank you to all of you who take the time to join this session. So thank you and thank you in whole. All right, next, and add those and keep those questions coming. Keith wants to know, JC, what is a settlement agreement?
A settlement agreement is something that you arrive at the end of a notice of revocation. The ATF, the hearing officer and the director of industry operations, along with the deputy associate chief counsel and the division counsel, basically have an after action meeting, typically with me or an attorney, depending on how you went through your revocation hearing. And they said, you know what, we don't think we want to revoke this license, but we think that it's important enough, and they're not going to be able to go to their leadership with nothing in hand if they make a determination not to revoke. Typically, there's a fine. The fine is a maximum currently of $9,491 per incident. And then there's also a period of suspension possible up to 6 months. Now, it could be one or the other. It could be both. And it's up to us to negotiate that time. I will tell you that I have yet to have one that goes more than, I think the maximum that I've seen, JB, correct me if I'm wrong, was 30 days. I believe it was. That's the maximum. Vast majority are a week or two suspension. And the fines obviously, are negotiable, but expect a maximum of $9,491.
Yeah, we don't talk about that at all. And I don't know why, because I want to say it's not out of our pocket, it's out of yours. But yeah, the ATF has, prior to January of 2022, we did not see this fine imposed frequently at all, this fine program.
Yeah.
But they're going after everyone. So aside from the expenses JC already told you about, if you get to keep your license, you're paying fines.
Yeah.
That's,
now, again, as we discussed during the revocation slides, you may just get to keep your license and face a recall inspection in 12 months. We usually see it 12 to 18 months. You may not get a fine or a settlement agreement. It just really depends on your situation. I would tell you that atypically you will see, if you don't get revoked and you see a settlement agreement, it's because of a NICS violation, or you've transferred a firearm to somebody inappropriately. In other words, prior to the 3-day wait or after the 3-day wait, things of that nature. So, or after the 30 days rather. So there's nuances that will drive you into the potential for a settlement agreement.
Yeah. And the issue is, JC, you're the one to talk to this, but every ATF director is a little bit different, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it really is derived from the fact that, look at their locality, their geolocation, right? Chicago, higher crime rates, Baltimore, higher crime rates, things like that can play into this, and they're being pushed to, take action on FFLs that are not remaining in compliance and respecting the law.
Yeah. All right. Next, a cost to do a mock inspection in Oklahoma for a small dealer that has only sold less than 100 guns over the last 3 years. Unfortunately, Gun Owl unfortunately, our visit, our inspection process is the same for anybody, whether it be in, whether they're just starting out, sold 1,000 guns, 100 guns, 10,000 guns. Our one-day visit is not only looking at paperwork, it's, it's about 3 hours of training and review. And then there's a process review and audit. So it's not just an audit process. There's a lot that goes into it that qualifies you for that legal defense fund, so that if and when we ever have to sit before the director and argue your case, we can say we did all these different things on that date we visited. We counseled and coached you all along whenever you needed it. And hence, you got the support to try to do this right. So unfortunately, it's not a discount. It is that $750 if you're joining the NSSF program and want to start there. Okay. Next question I want to answer this, JC, and I'm thinking you're going to say the same thing, but it says, Matt says, I feel like this doesn't really apply to home-based FFLs. Matt, here's the sad story. Last month, we turned down 3 FFLs for help. They got revoked, home-based FFLs. They couldn't afford the program at all. They weren't in the hopper. Somebody told them to call us, so they found us on Google. And sadly, those 3 couldn't afford even the $5,000 retainer that has to be provided when we get into one of these situations. And they're out of business today. So don't think just because you're a home-based dealer, you're not subject to the inspection process. And again, just like us, it's the same for all. Whether you were never inspected before or have been inspected 3 times with good results, the same inspection process applies to everyone, big and small, new and old. So, all right, any Detroit, Michigan ATF field office stats?
Sure. Hold on one sec. Let me pull it up.
You go to Detroit, JC. I'll get the next one here.
All right. So Detroit realized, where are you? Just had it open. There it is. So Detroit has had 41 FFLs without any violations, 25 FFLs that have had a report of violations issued. They've had 1 revocation, 8 warning conferences, and 23 warning letters issued for a total of 100 various FFLs being inspected. So that's for this year. Now, you got to understand something about Kansas City and Dallas, because they always pop up as high numbers. It's because they have a higher number of overall support staff. So they have more industry operations investigators. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, and that's based on the number of FFLs in their assigned region, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Freddie from Texas. Had a gentleman under 21 with a valid LTC, license to carry permit, wanted to buy a rifle with no background, which is permissible. I was uncomfortable and was not aware that this was possible. Anyone else hear of this before?
Yes. Let me just touch on one thing real quick as it relates to concealed carry permits, license to carry, and all that stuff. Yes, certain states have met the criteria to allow an exemption from a background check, according to FBI NICS. And there's specific stipulations and requirements around that. It can only be for 5 years. There has to be continuous background checks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Understand one thing, that license to carry permits an individual to carry a concealed firearm. That is the nuts and bolts of it. A lot of people get caught up in this because they'll, certain states will issue some letter extending a concealed carry permit expiration date for concealed carry. That doesn't mean that an expired LTC can be utilized for a background check, even with that letter. So understand that. The concealed carry permit allows an individual to conceal carry a firearm. That is its premise, all right? Just because they're an exception doesn't mean that exception overflows into all these odd scenarios. Now, that being said, in this scenario, the individual's been issued a license to carry for a couple of different reasons in the state of Texas. I forget what House bill it is. I think it's like 918 or something for these scenarios. So that LTC is legitimate for conducting or exempting you from a background check. Understand that it doesn't mean they're exempt from the over 21 and older for handguns or anything like that. This was a rifle scenario, so it's fine.
And the other issue, just I'm reading ahead, may have missed that, but just because they have the LTC does not dictate that you must accept that in lieu of
Exactly. Yep.
running a NICS.
Exactly. Doesn't mean you have to accept it at all.
Right, if you're not feeling comfortable accepting LTCs instead of doing a background check, don't do it. You don't have to. And many customers will argue with you that you have to, and you do not. It's your option, right? Which takes me to the next one, JC. It says sales associate ran a NICS check after transfer was done with an LTC. And I don't know why they would do that.
I don't know either.
But NICS came back as a delay. Should the background check be canceled?
No, you already transferred. They already transferred the firearm.
It says sales associate ran a NICS check after the transfer was done with an LTC, like we were just talking about.
Anytime you initiate a NICS transaction, everything else becomes null and void. That NICS transaction, if you initiate a NICS transaction and then turn around and accept the LTC and let the firearm be transferred, that is a revocable violation. And you're susceptible to that $9,491 fine and an up to 6 month suspension. The background check supersedes any exemption. You initiate a background check, you're done. No LTC. We have it so often happen where you initiate the background check and then the customer, lo and behold, says, oh, I have an LTC. And the FFL, unbeknownst to them, accepts it, lets the background check go on, and they don't realize the situation they just put themselves in. So you initiate a background check, that's it. You've initiated the background check. Nothing else can happen from that point. You have to wait on a response.
Right. All right. From Tim, you may have to follow up with JC on this.
Yeah, you definitely need to follow up because there's a scenario there that could land you in a potential issue with the ATF.
Yeah, I've got Tim on the next question, JC, but
all right.
That was Heather. May have to call. All right. So Tim, Tim says, I use a fastbound for electronic bound book. Mm-hmm. Am I required to print it out each time, or is it a different file of the latest download acceptable?
According to ATF ruling 2016-2, there are specific stipulations about the backups of those. It has to be backed up a minimum of every 6 months. We recommend backing it up continually, and Fastbound does back it up daily. We also recommend that you do a backup locally. We recommend 3 backups. One on a thumb drive, one on an external hard drive or a local machine or server, and then obviously the cloud backup. I don't know if you're using E4473 cloud or who you're using for your backup for a Fastbound, but you need to make sure those 3 things are happening. The ruling, I want to say it stipulates every 6 months, but we recommend much more frequent backups than that.
Yeah, if you're asking about the printout is once every 6 months. Don't ask us why. When they developed this ruling back in 2016, it didn't make sense to us then because, as you understand, your A&D book changes as soon as you have the next acquisition or disposition. Yeah. But for whatever reason, every 6 months, you're supposed to do a full printout and put it on the shelf and throw the old one away. JC, yeah, it is a daily backup is required on an alternate server. Actually, yeah, so yeah, daily, and then the other, read the rule or download it from our site if you need it. Next from Mr. McCluskey. All right, regarding dates that you mentioned on 4473s, one of your things was PCS effective date and ID expiration dates. How would these be considered incorrect, as if audited, there wouldn't be data attached to the bottom of this backup?
Well, here's the scenario that we run into quite a bit with this specifically. An IOI looks at a 4473 and identifies a concern, or does a random sampling, which they can do during an inspection, and they find something that is not accurate or complete on that 4473, and they do that more in-depth analysis of that form. They run certain information on the individual, etc. That's how you can get caught up in that. And that's why it's so vitally important that, number one, you get the correct information on the 4473, and number two, you don't include any unnecessary or unrequired or not required additional documentation of the 4473 that can get you into more trouble. So you want to make sure everything is accurate and complete on the 4473, because if it runs into that random sampling scenario, that IOI might be able to investigate, that is in their title, and look into that individual further and that transaction further. We've had ATF show up at houses of customers and ask them questions about transactions.
Yeah, here's the other bigger issue on the dates, the right dates. So for example, if your certification date is June 7th by the customer and the PCS effective date is June 20th, they bought the gun, they got there in town, they were trying to set up their apartment or base residence, and they wanted to go out and buy a gun in their new state because they couldn't have one in their old state. And they run into your shop and you sell them that, you transfer that gun, you just it was a military order, out of state, handgun, etc. You're screwed. That effective date would be after their transfer date. So, and then we find a lot of dates of, when putting these dates in place, we find people writing down the dates of birth instead of today's date, or vice versa. Especially on types of ID, when employees are looking at the ID and doing the next check and doing the 4473. They see the date of birth and expiration date right on top of each other on the photo ID, and they write the wrong date in place. That's the type of stuff we're saying when you're looking at dates. It may not be the ATF doing that investigation JC's talking about. It might be just the obvious stuff that we see on inspections. And luckily we catch them before the ATF does. Okay. How do I know the under 18 weight has been increased if I don't use the internet to do my background check? Small dealer here, and I always call. Great question. And we had this unfortunately occur last month or 2 months ago with someone who calls in the background checks. You just need to know that you are subject to a delay when they're under 21 years of age. You are subject to a delay of up to 10 days for that individual. It is your responsibility to check with the ATF, to check with FBI NICS. It is your responsibility to call them and make sure it hasn't changed, because again, they are not calling you most of the time, if at all, anymore. That they're updating it in the eNICS system, in the database they use, and it's incumbent on you to call and ask if that person is still in delay status. If they are, write a little note in box 32, who you talked to on what date at what time, because they took that little box off of the 4473 for you to use, because the majority of people are using the electronic system and not using a call-in system anymore. So have your proof, who'd you talk to, date and time you called. It sounds like a real pain in the you-know-what, but cover your bases.
Yep. The other question on that is, and it could be just because of their location in the country and the challenges with internet and obtaining internet, why aren't you on eNICS? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be with them in a week, and the message that they continually convey to FFLs is there's going to be less and less individuals manning the phones as more FFLs get online and registered for the eNICS application. I'm telling you right now, it's a far easier process, and you're gonna fall into a trap of longer wait times as it relates to phone in NICS transaction checks. So just keep that in mind, that as time goes on, you're gonna get into a situation where it takes you longer to get an approval.
RC wants to know about private party transfers. What action is recommended if a transferred firearm is not returned to the seller?
Yeah.
We ended a transfer because buyer answered 21A incorrectly. We contacted the seller several times for return shipping label, and they have never contacted us over 3 months. Do we sell that firearm since it seems to be abandoned? JC, this is an FFL to FFL transfer.
Yeah, this is one of the problems with FFL to FFL transfers. Non-licensees who come in to pick up the gun, all of a sudden they're prohibited, or whatever the case may be. What do you do with the gun when the original FFL who actually sold it doesn't respond back to you? And the answer is well, you can certainly put a policy out there that for abandonment property, you got to look at your state laws around abandoned property. Generally speaking, what we recommend is offer to buy the gun from the individual. Now, you can be a nice person and offer to buy it at the price that he paid for it. But you can obviously put some margin in there and say, look, I know you paid this much for it. I'm willing to give you this much for it, and see if they bite on that. That's your best course of action. Otherwise, you can certainly pay to ship it back to the FFL, or have the transferee who purchased it online cover the cost of shipping it back to the other FFL. That's on them. So the key to all this, though, is to create a policy and put it out in the public space, put it on your website about all the different scenarios with transfers, and make sure that people are aware that you're going to charge them for abandoned property or for scenarios such as this.
Yeah, storage, abandoned properties, incomplete information. At the end of the day, though, if nothing else happens, you have to surrender that firearm to the ATF.
Yep.
Yep.
Or
You
local law enforcement.
Yeah, you can't acquire it. It's not forfeited property. None of that unless you have a contract in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Had a NICS check yesterday, 7/9/23, was proceeded and transferred. When shutting down NICS last night, it said the transfer date was 7/13. The customer was 35 years old. Ohio, there's no waiting period. I guess he's asking what's up. Now, we have had other calls like this in the last couple of months. And the only thing I can say is we can ascertain without doing much research is that these initially became a delay and a fast proceed. So because it initiated as a delay, it automatically gets a 3-day Brady date, expiration date assigned. So that's my only thing I've been able to figure out. JC, anything else on you? But it's okay to transfer as long as you have that proceed. Yep. And you printed out your status report for proof.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of just abnormalities with this, where they'll do a quick proceed and then the examiner looks at it again, or so somebody does a second look at NICS or the point of contact state and says, whoa, wait a second, and then they issue a delay on it. As JB said, as long as you have the documentation that shows it was a proceed and you notate everything accurate on the 4473, you should be in good shape. Those are those scenarios, though, where you want to keep the anomaly. You want to do that NICS print detail and save it in your buddy file, just so you have it as a matter of record, or just save it on your computer, print it as a PDF. So that way, if it ever gets questioned, you have the documentation to prove that everything was good to go, or at least everything you were told was good to go, and you could transfer that firearm.
Yeah. Steve asks a similar question. What if you don't have the NICS status printout regarding delays? All of our transactions are on paper. So I'm assuming he has a full paper. Steve, I don't know if you're calling in your background checks or such, but if you're calling him in, again, make notes in box 32. That's your box. You can write your notes in there. If you don't have if you don't have eNICS, that's the best you can do. If you have eNICS and don't know what we're talking about, just drop us a line, separate email, and or give us a call, and we'll walk you through how to better utilize your eNICS system. Okay. A driver's license is still okay to use to sell or transfer a firearm if it is not the one with the star. Oh,
the Real ID Act. Yes, absolutely. And we run into it so many times where FFLs attach that driver's license to the 4473, and the IOI attempts to cite violations because, quote unquote, it's not for federal identification purposes. The IOI is incorrect. We've worked with ATF headquarters on this, and we've tried to educate as many field divisions as we can. And unfortunately, there's still some misinformation and out there as far as IOIs are concerned. So be aware that that does not have anything to do with firearm transactions or firearm transfers. It has everything to do with with domestic transportation and things such as that. So we've got that guidance from headquarters of the ATF. So if you ever run into that scenario, let us know. We're more than happy to forward the communication from ATF headquarters to you so you can provide that evidence.
Yeah, and as a side note, the Real ID program has been postponed to 2025.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that they're issuing them state by state, but across the country, it's not going to be required until 2025. Private transfer. What happens when a delay, then proceed, but owner backs out of the sale?
That's what we call a dealer canceled transaction, or just a canceled transaction. You are still required to maintain that form 4473 and complete it out to item 35. You're required to notate the NICS transaction number and the date it was submitted, etc. So that form needs to be completed fully and completely through item 35. Don't date it, and you're going to want to file that in a separate dealer cancel transaction file it separate from your denieds, file it separate from your 4473s, keep a completely separate file for that.
The ATF will require those for inspection when they come to look, because they'll bring their NICS numbers with them and they'll say, where's this number on what form?
Yep. You're required to be accountable for every NICS transaction number you're issued.
Private part. Oh, so back to the private. What I was going to delay when proceed, but owner backs out. Maybe this question, JC, is what do I do with the gun?
Private party transfer. Well,
Yeah,
hopefully you didn't.
It sounds like he kept the gun. The
Ugh,
buyer got it proceeded,
Yeah.
but backed out. Now
Backed
the seller has to come back and get the gun.
Yeah, the seller has to come back and get the gun, and because you've acquired it into your A&D records, you're now required to do an ATF Form 4473 and a background check on the original owner. That's why we tell you don't take that firearm into your acquisition books until after the transaction is ready to be completed. In other words, the buyer has completed their background check, received to proceed, then you take that firearm into your A&D records. Don't do it until then, because if in this scenario that buyer backs out or gets denied and you've acquired that firearm into your records, the buyer or the seller now has to do a 4473 and a background check to get their gun back.
Yep. Note came in from Tony this morning on email, said, hey, am I required to keep a separate bound book for gunsmith books? For gunsmith transfers, I only do one once in a while.
You don't have to. It just makes it cleaner, a little bit more easy to differentiate between what guns what. But as long as you have some sort of notation or something saying it's for gunsmithing, that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, you won't have a 4473, but it's in your A&D book as an in and out. No 4473. Denote it somehow in your A&D book, just for clarity when the ATF comes and inspects your records.
Yep. Maybe like a little GS with a circle around it on the firearm so they know it's gunsmithing.
Yeah. What's the best policy on situations when we are buying guns from customers to resell and they don't want to wait for us to appraise them? Can a customer leave a gun with us for a short amount of time, an hour or two, so we can appraise it and then have them simply come back?
As long as it's all done in the same day, you should be okay. But if that gun stays overnight at your shop, then you have to acquire that firearm.
Yeah, similar to a gunsmith, servicing in and out does not have to be logged in this book unless it's kept overnight. Yeah. Is it okay to leave the firearm manufacturer and importer names in reverse order in box 1A? 1A says manufacturer and or importer. If we incorrectly write the importer first and then the manufacturer, is it okay?
If it's a one or two time incident, yeah, you're fine. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but ensure that the information is recorded accurately as they request.
Yeah, it'd be hard for an inspector to cite you for that. They'll slap your hand for it, but follow the instructions.
Yep.
How to handle a firearm purchase by a Canadian citizen who has a summer residence in our state?
They would have to be a non-immigrant alien. They would have to fulfill the exemption for that non-immigrant alien. And in that scenario, it would, the only exception that any time we ever see is that hunting license or hunting permit.
And they'd have to have proof of residency in your state issued by federal government, issued by government, probably a house title or property lien or some property tax form.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they'll have dual residency. You can watch for that. Right. Okay. What was the effective date? What was the effective date the manufacturer and the importer was required?
Oh God.
Forever.
Yeah. I mean, let's go back 10 years. I know that it was required on the 2016 version. I'm trying to think what the version before 2016 was.
2012, I saw it. So
2012. Yeah.
It's always been in the bound book.
Yeah.
Yeah, those records haven't changed. Here's the deal. Your inspectors have.
Yeah.
You had inspectors coming to you prior to Biden that were loosey-goosey, letting you slide, good old boys, maybe old friends. Maybe the same inspector came, 3-4 times in a row and never counseled or coached you or violated you or cited you on any of these violations. We are finding that across the country, that there's all of a sudden a new inspector and they're going by the book, and that's why we're going by the book. A lot of people think we're, like I said, what's the fuss with all the details? We're teaching you by the book. You want to do less, do less. Is it your business and your credibility and your future? Absolutely. We can only do as much as we can to get you past your next inspection based on zero tolerance. No one likes when we give this speech. We give it. I probably give this speech 5 times a week. You don't want to do it, don't do it. If you want to pass your next inspection and stay in business, change your behaviors, train your staff, and do it right. Get it right the first time. Thank you for that question. I'm not trying to be mean or nasty, but this manufacturer importer thing is ruffling feathers everywhere. They're hating us for telling you to do it, but it's not us. It's the Gun Control Act, the FFL requirements, the old gun book, the old Bible. It's been in there forever. It's just that it wasn't enforced. And that's what zero tolerance is all about. Going after the places that we've all been a little loose on, or loosey-goosey, maybe a date here, a date there, but it's that important and that much of a requirement now.
It's a requirement, period. You
Yeah.
don't want to do it? Okay. Let us know how that works out for you.
Yeah. Roland says, do you have any guides for an 07 process and what to watch out for?
You know, an 07 is no different. The only difference on an 07 is obviously the manufacturing aspect, and there are specific requirements around that. Other than that, everything is pretty much the same as far as a type 1 or a type 2 dealer. You're conducting firearms transactions. The transfer process is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is as it relates to the actual manufacturing process. If you email me, I can certainly, give you a bulleted process to follow as it relates to the manufacturing process. But everything else, once you start transferring a firearm to a non-licensee, or even transferring FFL to FFL, that's all pretty much the same as any other FFL.
And the acquisition disposition process is a little bit different on manufacturing, but
Yeah.
basically 90% of what you do is the same to a licensed 01. For anyone who doesn't know, an 07 is a FFL who has a manufacturing license.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone gets denied for applying for an FFL, does the ATF reimburse for the funds submitted for the application and license types?
Yes, they'll issue a refund for that. Keep in mind, if you've been denied for an FFL, you do have the right to a hearing. So you have to respond to the denial within 15 days. And you can actually go and have a hearing and ask the ATF why they denied you and fight it. We've done it a number of times.
Yeah. Similar to this question, JC, it wasn't here, but I had a few of these this month. If I have a type 01 and I'm worried about a future revocation, should I apply for a type 07 now to have a backup license?
Here's what I would tell you about that. Initially, when the Biden zero tolerance policy came into effect, a lot of FFLs were doing that, and they were essentially getting away with it, for lack of a better phrase. It was being allowed. Now what's happening is if you apply for a new license, it may actually instigate an inspection. So just be aware of that there is a potential that if you apply for another license, that application could instigate an inspection with the local field division if you haven't been inspected before.
Yeah.
If you're concerned about your 01 and you need to go and get another license because of those concerns, you may be better suited to talk to us offline, and let's see what we can do to make sure that you get out of whatever trouble you're in.
There you go. All right. I have a couple of traces. One called and I gave the info over the phone.
Yep.
It was last year and I didn't document it. Okay. If what's past is past, what's done is done. If you are not on ENIX, if you're still calling in your traces and responding via the phone, just start writing your information in box 32 as to who you talk to and at what time and date.
Yeah.
You're
pulling the 4473 anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a go forward thing. And, we didn't talk about it today, but hey, I know most of you folks would visiting, you have your ATF communications log in there, or your ATF diary. One of my clients is calling it. anything relevant to the ATF, compliance, training issues, traces, etc. Anything unusual, straw purchase preventions, make sure you're logging it in your diary or your comm log. So you have you have your recall if and when you need it down the road if you're challenged.
Yep. And that
Right.
comes in very useful when it comes to communicating at warning conferences or, the unfortunate scenario of a revocation. So those come in they are very valuable tools for your defense.
I think you summed this one up already. What should I do about a firearm transfer that's never picked up?
Yeah, already answered that one.
Yep. Yeah. Again, give us a call, drop us a note. At the end of the day, you have to try to buy it from that individual if you can contact them, charge them storage fees, or surrender it to the ATF, basically. All right. If a military surplus rifle has its original, this one's good, has its original serial number on the receiver, and the importer also added their own serial number by the importer stamp, what should the original serial number be considered void? Must we always use only the importer's serial number?
By regulation, the serial number is supposed to be on the receiver. So you could, you always want to document as much as you can on that firearm. Now, what's the likelihood of that firearm ever ending up in a trace request? Probably slim to none. But what you can do in these scenarios when an importer actually marks it as well is just document both serial numbers. Do the receiver serial number and then slash the other serial number. That way you can provide as much information as possible about that firearm if it is ever traced or there ever comes into question.
Yeah, we get a lot of those types of questions, and our general answer to a lot of these types of questions is more is better than less.
Right.
You got multiple markings on the gun. You got looks like a Russian manufacturer and Century Arms International as the importer. Write Russian/CAI as your manufacturer and importer. Put a little note in box 32 that says a manufacturer in Russian language or Russian letters.
Right.
The more you put in your 4473 that the next investigator from the ATF can look at, or if you send out paperwork in on a trace request, is understandable and detailed, the better. Okay, don't be afraid, but we don't attach everything to the forms, but you can go ahead and write in box 32. We don't see people using that box enough. You can write to JC's scenario, you can write 2 serial numbers in that box for serial number on the 4473 and your A&D log, and above one number you write receiver, above the other number you write barrel. Because you have 2 different serial numbers. So don't be afraid to put more information in detail to explain and identify that firearm. Okay. All right. ATF told me I must include customer's photo ID in 4473 records. You have told me don't include it. I'm confused.
Negative. There is nothing in regulation or federal law that requires you to attach a copy of the customer's ID. That is what we call the Code of IOI regulations. They're completely made up. Challenge anytime an IOI provides you information like that. Just say, hey, I'll totally follow the guidance you provide me. Can you just show it to me in regulation?
Yep.
Here at the end, no photo ID is required to be maintained with the 4473. Ask them to show you where it says it on the 4473 itself.
Yeah, ATF investigators hate when they find out JC or I are connected to the FFL inspecting, because again, throughout the inspection, we partner with you every day, several times a day if we have to. And when the inspector comes up with an issue and the ATF and the FFL says, "Oh my God, I didn't know that," typically it's because it's made up stuff. And we get on the phone with the inspector on site at your place completing the inspection, and we ask for the statutory direction or reference to that directive. And quite frankly, 8 out of 10 times they can't find it. So it's word of mouth hearsay among IOIs, and one guy thinks it's a great best practice. And actually 2 weeks ago, I was at a dealer in North Carolina, and we had the same scenario. I said, no, you do not. It was all about the North Carolina safe handgun requirement notification, similar to the Youth Handgun Safety Act. And the gun dealer had all these papers attached regarding customer signature acknowledging that they were given this information as per the state requirement. And then the employee had to sign off on and date it that they gave them the form. I was like, what the heck is this? Because the day before I was at a different dealer in North Carolina who wasn't doing that. So I did my research and I couldn't find it as a requirement. I emailed the director of industry operations, 15 minutes later, he called me and say, "Oh my God, John, that's not supposed to be happening. Let me talk to my guy who was over there last." And sure enough, he found out it was his quote unquote best practice. So he apologized. He would take care of it with his IOI. This wouldn't be discussed at future training sessions, and hence we move forward. But we find that very, very often, not to spite the new inspectors or some of these folks who are trying to do a really good job in the interest of public safety, but if it's not required by law, you shouldn't be doing it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you might run into some IOIs that know us and they'll say they love those guys. So because we help you stay compliant, makes their life easier when they're coming to do an inspection.
All right, good question. Where would you recommend to go to FFL classes for beginners?
Well, actually go right back to the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Even if you become a basic member, you can attend their webcasts or their webinars and such. They do have something called a starting point, which is part of the premium retail membership package. Same thing, $750. And we'll come out and we'll sit down and spend a day with you, teaching you all the nuances of becoming an FFL, right from the starting point of becoming an FFL, hence the name. So we are actually in the process of developing a learning management system as well to provide you all with access to. So stay tuned for that. But really, those are the primary resources that are available to you out there.
Yeah. And we do for our VIP clients, we do a free 90-day set, a 90-minute session.
Yep.
Once you sign up with us, if you need 90 minutes of dedicated one-on-one Zoom training on A&D, straw purchasing, 4473, and the inspection process, that's part of our program if you're interested, right from our website. All right. What do you recommend is the best practice in the situations where someone fills out the 4473 wrong because they didn't understand the form, etc.? They answered 21A wrong and it was totally harmless and nothing nefarious seems to be afoot. Can we allow them to fill out another 4473? Should we wait a day before letting them fill out another one, etc.?
You don't have to fill out a new 4473. If you've determined that there's nothing quote unquote nefarious afoot, and you've qualified them and you understand their intent and they made a mistake, it's real simple. Single line, strike through the error, have them initial and date that correction, have them mark the correct box. There's nothing wrong with that. People make that mistake all the time. So there's nothing that says you have to start a new 4473. As a matter of fact, I recommend staying away from starting a new 4473 because then the ATF can look at that as something nefarious is afoot, that you are falsifying records in some way. So just use the same form, have them strike through the error that they made. As long as you've qualified everything and you know nothing is wrong and they are the actual buyer of that firearm, then have them make the necessary correction and move on.
Regarding corrections, if they're making a correction before the transfer is completed, make the correction on the original form.
Yep.
You don't need to make a copy of the form unless the firearm's been transferred, it's out of your store, and you realize there's an error. Only thereafter do you make a copy of the page in question and have either the employee or the customer fix it on a copy. I was in a deal a couple weeks ago, and they had copies. They had 100 copies I was like, what the heck? How many mistakes are you making after the transfer? Every one of these is could be a revocable item. And they were like, no, we make photocopies for every mistake that's made. And I was like, oh boy.
I had the same thing. I was like, what are you doing here? Come on.
Yeah. So we went back on every one of those and put a note in box 32 that on the copy that said, pre-transfer correction. That way, when the ATF gets there, they're not going to flip out either.
Yeah, they're not going to say the same thing we just said. What the heck are you doing?
All right, just had my first denied transaction. Should denied 4473s be kept separate?
Yes, absolutely. They're supposed to be maintained separately in chronological order, date order, or alphabetically, or however you want to do it. But you do need to maintain those for the entirety of your licensed business. And you need to make sure that you complete that form all the way through to item 35. That's your signature as the FFL. Do not date that form. A firearm has not been transferred, so do not date it.
A couple more questions here, guys. If you got more, please put them in the chat box. We got a few more minutes. RC says, if our state requires private party transfers to go through an FFL dealer, are dealers required to do private party transfers at all? And can we have a business policy that we do not do private party transfers?
It depends on what state you're in.
Yeah, he doesn't
Some
say what
states do
state.
require. Some states do require the FFL to conduct a private party transfer if they are presented with one. Other states, that requirement does not exist in the law. So it really depends on what state you're in.
And also in many states, if you are required to do it, you're also limited on what you can, they dictate what you can charge for that process to actually occur. So
Yeah.
I was in a store a couple weeks ago and they raised their price. It was $16.50 by state statute. And they were charging $65. And I said, why are you doing that? And they said, so people don't come here.
Mm.
And I said, okay, you're going to get in big trouble if the state comes to inspect or if somebody else sees that sign. So be careful with what you're doing. All right. Check your records. I'm a new FFL and I had a lot of personal guns that I have. I want to sell them through my FFL. How do I do this?
Acquire them from yourself. That's the key. Acquire them from yourself. Now, if you're not a sole proprietor, you're going to have to do a 4473 and a background check to take that gun into your personal collection. If you're a sole proprietor, then you just check it out to yourself. But you need to be careful about how you're doing this, because if it looks like you're, doing back and forth with firearms, that could throw up some red flags. But in order to purchase, or in order for you to sell a firearm as an FFL that's in your personal collection, simply acquire it from yourself.
Yeah, that was the question, JC. It was about how do I guess this might be a new FFL. How do I push my private inventory into my business inventory?
Just like you would receive any other firearm. You acquire it from yourself and put in all the required information.
Now talk to your tax accountant, because that is an equity contribution of inventory to your business.
Mm-hmm.
And just don't donate your gun, your personal property to the business. Yeah. Talk to your accountant about that piece. All right. Adele says, I have fast bound and I passed my inspection with no reported violations. All right. Now I have, I think we were supposed to put Adele in our trophy slide. Sorry about that, Adele. No violations. I have Core Store because I have a website with them. Their 4473 process is weird and I'm finding it difficult. Should I continue with them or switch back to Fastbound? And to your previous point, we applied for a second license, 07 license, which triggered an inspection. Well, Adele, thank you for letting the viewers understand that, because we've seen that, as JC has explained, with that second license application. JC, what do you think about switching back to Fastbound?
Fastbound's a very good product. As somebody we work with, she said she uses Coreware as well, Core Store.
He has Coreware now. It's a he.
Yeah. Okay. He has Coreware now. Look, here's what I'll tell you about solution providers, and every one of them is a little bit different. And the biggest complaint that I hear from FFLs all over the country who use all of the different solutions is essentially the solution doesn't work like I work. And in certain circumstances, you just need to be a little bit adaptable and run your business the way the solution works. The challenge is solution providers can only go so far to make their solution adaptable to every environment. And that's the challenge we run into, is everybody runs their business a little bit differently. So, we like Core Store, we like Fastbound. Core Store is a full-on solution from point of sale through EA&D, E4473. Fastbound is just E4473 and EA&D. As far as I know, they don't integrate. So that's one challenge that you're going to face, is kind of double work, because if you keep Core Store as your point of sale, then you're going to have to re-enter your inventory into your point of sale system so you can sell properly, right? For the transaction aspect of it. With Fastbound, then you're going to have to keep that separate for the A&D records and your 4473s. So it could create some additional work for you by transitioning.
Yeah. Adele, you're not the only one with this problem. We have clients all over the country that have switched between this one and that one and didn't like that one, or to JC's point, do business a little differently and have layaway and whatever, give us a call, get online with us, set up a call, and we'll find time to talk you through the logic you might have to consider before making a big move like that.
And, you know, it's not unheard of. We do get on the phone with Ezra and Aaron over at Core Store. We do get on the phone with the folks, Jared over at Fastbound, to talk through problems and figure out what the right solution is. So it's not beyond us to get on the phone with these guys and have a conversation about the problems you're having. So,
yep. All right. How far back is ATF going to go on an average during an audit or inspection?
12 months of transfers is general rule, and 5 years of denied transactions. So generally speaking, you're going to see at least the last 12 months. Now, if something's found to be criminal, they may go back a decade or more. So keep in mind that the atypical ATF firearms compliance inspection by an industry operations investigator is going to be the previous 12 months. So if they showed up today, July 10th, 2023, they're going to look at July 10th, 2022 through yesterday.
And if they feel compelled, they can go back further,
yep,
to the last inspection or to the beginning of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does your business, as a Colorado FFL, and IOI told me we must put both NICS and CBI numbers in box 27B, but the requirement says NICS or state transaction number. Do I need both?
Yes, you record both.
Yeah, that's just where it's stipulated. Other states do the same thing. Some other states. So yeah, if your state requires it or it dictates it, do that. Yeah.
It's because they receive a printout from the state, like Colorado CBI. They receive a printout, and you get the Q number and you get other information there, and that's how they kind of compare your 4473s to the information they have to validate everything.
Yeah. As a quick note, for all of you who have state-supported background check programs or partial background check programs, JC, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically when you submit your background check to the state, they check all the local state records that to the best of their abilities, and if they have nothing on you, then they push that through to NICS.
Correct.
To go through the federal review process, and then it comes back to the state, and then the state hands it back to you. So don't think it's just a state check. They are utilizing NICS on each and every background check they process for you.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, JC and J. Does a business? Oh, does your business required to do private? Or can you simply stick to? Oh, does your business required to do private transfers, or you can simply just stick to sales? Now,
that depends on your state. If the state requires an FFL to do private party transfers, then the state requires you to do it, and you have to do it for whatever they say. So,
right.
So it just depends on your location.
Okay, Mr. McCluskey says, we were using Fastbound, and Fastbound won't let us do what we have to do to start the new form or correct the old form. So they have to start a new form. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the providers make you just start a new form completely.
Yeah, I think Bravo does the same thing for pawnbrokers, but yeah. Now, here's an option for you, and this is permissible. So if you're doing electronic 4473 and you have a mistake on a form that was completed on the computer or a tablet or whatever you're doing, you can print that out and have the correction made on the printout using a pen. And then just, if you're filing these hard records, these paper records in a file cabinet, you're fine.
Yep.
You don't have to go and fill out that or start over with a 4473 unless it's restricting you from going forward with the prohibited questions and getting to the section. But if you have, for example, somebody didn't spell their middle name or first name properly, and you find that after you get a background check done and before they transfer the gun, just take that form and have the customer take a pen and update the form with the correct information, initial and date it, and you're all good. There's no reason to go back into Bravo or Fastbound or whoever it might be to start a whole new form, because you will have the accurate and complete detail on the form in your file cabinet. Okay. California dealer, should we just deny the resident lease as second ID, even though Cal DOJ is okay with it?
Yeah, Cal DOJ is fine with it, but from a federal standpoint, if you have to use supplemental documentation to verify residency or verify identity, then it has to be a government issued document. It cannot be a lease. What Cal DOJ says for their purposes, that's all well and good. But from a federal standpoint, it must be a government issued document.
To clarify, under 4473, if you don't need a supplemental document, you're fine.
Yep.
But over on the DROS, the California state form, if for that second ID requirement,
Yep.
if you're just using a lease over on the DROS form, you're fine.
Yeah.
As long as you didn't need it on the 4473. Right. Okay. Does adding a new RP to an FFL typically trigger an inspection?
No, generally speaking, the local field division won't even know it.
We have been using CoreStore for a few years and worked out a lot of bugs with them. I might be able to help her with her issue or give her some direction. All right, so whoever was talking about CoreStore, I don't know if it was Adele or someone else. Yeah, go out to email comply. I think it's compliant. Oh yeah,
Compliance at Tombstone Tactical. It's Tony. Tony can help you out. Thanks,
Yeah.
Tony. Appreciate you, brother.
All right, Adele, you got that email right there. Let us know if you need help. Lauren says, if purchasing an NFA item that is currently on a Form 4, would the transfer be on a Form 3, and does it all fall under the SOT for tax?
No. So if you are purchasing a Form 4 from an NFA firearm from a non-licensee that's on a Form 4, and you're bringing it into your FFL, you are going to have to do another Form 4 and pay the $200 tax. There is no non-taxed transfer from a non-licensee to another non-licensee or to a licensee. So again, you'll have to do a Form 4 and do the SOT, the tax.
Yeah, here's just a little more on this whole thing. We get these calls once or twice a week, actually now, because there's so many suppressors out there. When folks get when individuals get a suppressor transferred to them on an approved Form 4, they paid the $200, they get to keep it. If they ever want to sell that to someone else, they're going to pay another $200 to get rid of it. You know, a lot of folks don't realize that, and we deliver the bad news. That's why the gun trust is so advantageous. You know, that way many people own that suppressor, many people can use it, et cetera, keep it within the trust, because if that approved Form 4 item ever gets sold, it's going to cost $200 to sell it, and who wants an old suppressor? I mean, it degrades in value so quickly.
Yep.
So a gun dealer cannot obtain a silencer from a non-licensee without paying that $200 transfer Form 4 transfer fee. Yep. All right. When filling out the 4473, does ink color matter? Oh, I'm glad we have this question. We have many customers that pull out their own pen to fill out the 4473s. We always use the black pen, the black ink on the dealer side.
No, Jesus. What are they're using blue or black? Use black. Use black. Here's a little secret. Black pens, the ink blends in with the rest of the form. It's printed in black. You know, you guys that are using blue pen for the customer and black pen for the FFL or vice versa, y'all drive me crazy. All you're doing is drawing out the potential mistakes that you're making by doing that.
Yeah, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Buy a big box, a bunch of boxes of cheap black big pens or whatever you might want. Make everyone use the same color pen. It's great for a variety of reasons, and it does not, to JC's point, does not draw our eye to any specific part of the form when we're reviewing 300, 400, 500 forms. You don't want to do that. Don't make it easy for the inspectors. Yeah. Can the state dictate the price we charge for private transfers? I think we told you it varies by state. Check your state statute. How does a licensed dealer purchase an NFA item from an individual? We just talked about that. Yep, somebody, the customer has to fill out their Form 4 as if they're selling it to you, and you as an FFL have to fill out your part for recipient of that Form 4 transfer. Someone's got to pay the $200. So who's going to pay it?
And in those situations where you're buying from a non-licensee, where you're having to do a Form 4 and pay that tax, recommend deducting that from the purchase amount. Tell them, hey, exactly. Yeah, I'll buy it from you, but you're going to pay the tax.
Yeah. I like this comment. We use blue ink. Oh, many customers use blue ink. We always use black. So I'll go back to, hey, that's a great time for the customer to start their transfer document over. Yep. You know, customer can't follow instructions.
Yep.
Yeah. Just another general comment. I get this call a lot, JC, you do too. What happens if the customer makes a mistake on a form and I haven't yet processed it with a NICS background check? There's no NICS information on it. Do I have to keep the form?
Well, did you process a NICS
No,
transaction?
no NICS information on it at all.
Oh, yeah, no NICS. If you haven't processed a NICS transaction, you have no requirement to keep that form.
Yeah, and you're going to get that from IOIs that are going to tell you have to keep every form that a customer fills out, whether or not it's run through NICS or not, or the answer is no. Unless the customer has self-denied, and even on those, we are not, there's no statute, I believe, JC, to require self-denial transfers, is there? Or self-denial form 4473?
No requirement. Nope,
Right.
not until a NICS transaction number has been assigned to it.
Right, okay. Just to be clear, SOT FFLs have to pay an additional tax plus 200 for each NFA firearm they want to purchase from non-licensed persons. No, the answer is somebody pays just a $200 tax.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. Any preference on using E4473?
Any preferences? No, we have recommendations. It just really depends on you. If you're looking for an all-encompassing solution, there are a handful of providers out there that we recommend, that we like, their solution, because we do mock inspections and see their product and see how it works. If you're just looking for a E4473 and EA and D solution, we have a couple of those that we promote. And then we have the big daddies. There's a couple out there that do everything: e-com, point of sale, inventory management, E4473, e-storage, EA and D. They do it all. We can talk to you about the nuances of those systems, the positives, the negatives, the pros, the cons, and let you make a decision. Most are very affordable. It's when you get into the big boys where there's a question mark on affordability. So, but we can reach out to us. We can certainly talk you through what you actually need. But E4473 is kind of vague. There are two solutions out there that provide E4473 solutions with an EA and D. So that are good systems that we like, that the ATF appreciates. Always remember, anybody that says they're ATF approved, they are not. They are not. ATF does not approve any e-solutions that are out there. They may look at them. They may say they're in compliance with the ATF rulings, but in the end, it is you as the FFL that is responsible to make sure that the solution you are using is in compliance. They don't care whether or not the provider says they're approved or not. They care whether or not it's in compliance, and that is your responsibility.
Yeah, at least 3-4 times a month, JC or I call each other to communicate on a software platform that is not functioning correctly. And if they have seen, if he or she, if we're sharing the same common knowledge and concern. So the answer is yes. We basically make sure when we do visit that your software is working correctly, and there are a few out there that you just have to be cautious with. So
yeah.
All right, Stetson, thanks for asking this question. I haven't seen you in a while. I'll talk to you. Hope everything's good. Stetson says, if we need to be, do we need to be signing and printing our names on canceled 4473s that we are required to sign and print names on expired 4473? So I know what
he's asking here. If you ran a NICS transaction, and that either that form expired or the customer abandoned the transaction or you got it denied. Those are essentially the three situations where you have a form where a firearm wasn't transferred. You need to complete the form through item 35. That means print your name, sign your name, but do not date the form. You must keep those for the entirety of your license.
Yeah, and this goes for denials, dealer cancels, and any other form that has a NICS number recorded on it where the gun was not transferred. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, very often. I mean, this is a big piece when we do our inspection, when we pull the denials and cancels and miscellaneous and expired. I mean, there's forms all over the place that don't have a customer, an employee name and signature in box 34 and 35. And it's a very misunderstood piece, but every form that's in your file cabinet, whether it's transferred or not, if it has a NICS number on it, has to have completion through box 35. and if transferred through box 36.
So I got a direct question from somebody, and since they send it to me directly, I'll leave their name out of it. But the question is, what is our process regarding an abandoned NFA tax stamp? How do we handle the physical item, the paperwork, and the disposition? Here's a simple answer. You know, the NFA says that their terms are a reasonable amount of time. They do not define what a reasonable amount of time is. So in the case of an abandoned NFA firearm, where the individual has been given a couple phone calls and sent a certified letter and they just have not responded, all you have to do is contact NFA and say, please cancel this transfer and put it back on our NFRTR. That's the National Firearms Registry and Transfer Record. That's the simple process. Contact NFA, let them know that you can cancel that transfer. It'll come back on your NFRTR and you can go ahead and destroy that Form 4. They'll probably not send you a new Form 3. So just be aware of that. We tell everybody 30 days. Give the person 30 days. Now, there are some exceptions to that. I had one, I did a mock inspection last week. They had like 2 that they were waiting pick up by the customer. One of them, the customer was out of state. He actually works in another state and only comes home so often. And the other one is a military member that's on orders outside of the state. Those are kind of those exceptions where, you know, I'll let a little bit more loose terms as far as getting that transfer done. But generally speaking, give the person 30 days. Give them 30 days, give them 2 phone calls, send them a certified letter. If at the end of 30 days, they don't contact you or give you some guff or, you know, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. Just say, hey, look, I've got to get this thing off my books and get it out of here. It's been transferred to you. Move on. And go ahead and cancel the transfer altogether. So, and you know, the person asking me this, you know me well enough. You can, if any part of this is confusing, pick up the phone and call me. I'm happy to guide you through it in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, the most important piece here that JC explained is keep your notes, keep copies of things, letters you've sent them, copies of the registered mail receipts you forwarded, because there's going to be an issue later with who owes who money and why'd you do that, and you want to have your evidence in hand, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to hit this red leg firearms one?
You got my audio must be messed up. So it sounded like you said, said you only paid $200. I'll try email. So if you buy, if you have to pay an annual tax, 200, I don't know if it was purchased from, if you're buying a silencer from a non-licensee, somebody else who already has it on an approved Form 4, there's a $200 fee for the transfer to Form 4 to be completed from the non-licensee who currently possesses and has that silencer registered them back to the FFL. There's a $200 fee both ways, to the customer and from the customer. And you just have to figure out who's going to pay that $200 if you're negotiating into the buyback price of that silencer. Again, is it new? Is it used? Is it, you know, what's the depreciated value of that used silencer, and can you even sell it? So that's the only fee that has to be paid. But someone's going to have to pay it.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to pay it every time that firearm is transferred to a non-licensee, or if it's already on a Form 4 and moves back to a licensee, again, Form 4.
Yeah, Mark, I think we just answered Mark. I think that same question pertains to you.
Yeah, the only time you're going to see a NFA firearm on a Form 4 get transferred without the requirement of paying a tax is in an estate or heir situation. That's the only time on a Form 5, unless that individual sells it to the government via Form 5, which would be a very rare scenario. The only time that you'll ever see a non-taxable transfer of an NFA firearm from a non-licensee is if the situation is like an estate, somebody's been willed it an heir to an estate or something like that. And then it would be done on a Form 5, but there's other steps that need to be taken to ensure that Form 5 aligns with what the law requires.
JC, I think that's a wrap.
All right. Well, thank you to the 92 folks that stuck around until the very end. We're glad that you joined us today, and thanks for all your great questions. As always, you need us, give us a call or reach out via email. We're happy to help.
Yeah, we don't have a date in August yet set, but we'll let you know by the end of this week. We'll send out a recording of this, link to this recording and some of the other documents we say we prep for you. Again, thanks everyone. Have a great July and stay safe and stay compliant.